Good evening, and welcome to what promises to be a very interesting next hour. We'll be in conversation with Rohini Nilekani and Harish Bhat around the framework of Rohini's new book, Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar, A Citizen-First Approach. This is the book. So I've been following Rohini's thoughtful philanthropy for about a decade now. And as I read the book, I really enjoyed seeing the evolution of your philosophy through the collection of articles that comprise the book over the last 15 years, I think. And my understanding is that this book is an invitation to us, the citizens of India, and the world really, to have a conversation about whether the systems that we have created to work for us, Bazaar and Sarkar, have drifted away from their original purpose of serving Samaj. And I think this conversation is important not just for India but for the world because it's urgent and timely. As we sit here, world leaders have gathered in Egypt for COP27, where we're hearing that it's now too late to pull back from 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. And while humanity as a whole is responsible for climate change, arguably Bazaar has played a significant role in getting us there. And another side effect of Bazaar is wealth inequality and its intersectionality with gender. According to an Oxfam report in 2021, 22 men have more wealth than all the women in Africa. And we know that inequality actually increased sharply during COVID. Coming now to Sarkar, a report by independent watchdog Freedom House, which is an annual country-by-country assessment of political rights and civil liberties, downgraded the freedom scores of 73 countries in 2021, which is 75% of the global population. So that's obviously pointing to a clear rise in authoritarianism by Sarkar. But to quote Dickens, since this is a LitFest, while it feels like the worst of times, it's potentially also the best of times because every crisis is an opportunity to reimagine our systems and because we are at the cusp of incredible systems change. For my own work, I know that capitalism, for example, is radically being redesigned from the Milton Friedman idea of the purpose of business is only to make profit to stakeholder capitalism. And it's, I think what I took away from the book is that it's really up to us, to citizens, to play a role in reshaping those systems. And I think another reason that this conversation is special is because it's happening here in Bombay, in Rohini's hometown, a city that sits at the confluence of Samaj and Bazaar, with a smattering of Sarkar. And it's the city of the Indian dream, created in pursuit of the Bazaar, but one which has also had a very active Samaj from pre-independence. So with that, I'm going to now stop talking and turn to our amazing panelists. Rohini, the philanthropist and citizen who represents Samaj, but has also had a ringside view of Sarkar and Bazaar. And Harish, who is a prolific storyteller, as I discovered when I started reading his book, 40 Stories, that represent the Tata brand, arguably the most iconic brand in the history of Indian Bazaar. And he's here representing the enlightened Bazaar. So with that, let's move on to understanding the framework a little bit. So Rohini, many congratulations on your book. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote it and that car journey in Patna that crystallized your thinking around this framework.
धन्यवाद आरती. नमस्कार. Especially मुंबईच्या सर्व साहित्य रसिकांना माझा नमस्कार. माहेरी आल्यावर खूप बरं वाटतं नेहमी. And though I'm a Bangalorean now, it always feels wonderful to be back in my city. Thank you, Harish, also for being here. So it's so wonderful to be back at the Tata Literature Festival, and this time especially with a book in my hand. So to that question, the reason I wrote this book is for the last 15 years at least, I've been writing and speaking about the subject of Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. And that has been the philosophy that has really underpinned the philanthropy and the work that I do. But it really started when, through Argyam, my water foundation, we were traveling in Bihar, actually moving towards Khagadia from Patna. and moving towards a place where there had been a lot of rebel activity of Maoists and Naxalwadis. And in fact, we were traveling with our partner Prem Kumar Verma, who is no more. During the COVID time, we lost him. But he started talking about how, we were talking about why is there so much disturbance in Bihar, and we were heading towards some pretty unsavory regions, but those were the regions most in need of the work on water, because water and livelihoods are so tied in places like interior Bihar. But as we were driving on that dusty night roads, I remember he said that, देखिए पहले समाज, बाजार और सरकार का संतुलन बहुत अलग था. There was a very different balance between these three sectors. And in fact, Samaj was very strong. And the sense that Samaj is the foundational strong sector, and Bazaar and Sarkar were actually behind it, responding to the needs of Samaj. But that in the last 200-300 years, very clearly, and he started talking about the East India Company, and from there onwards, how strong Bazaar became, not just in India and over the Indian public, but also globally. And then how, especially in the last century or so, how strong Sarkar has become in so many countries of the world. And he said that actually the work ahead is to restore the agency of Samaj. And I started thinking about that a lot, and then started doing my own research, because there are many, many authors and writers who, since Aristotle's time and time immemorial, I'm sure in other cultures and writing, have been talking about this. And so I started thinking about it and realized really that perhaps we need to make a mental model shift, and that we need to see ourselves as citizens first. Of course, we are human beings first, but right after that, we are citizens of any society that we live in. And over the centuries, why were the Sarkar and Bazaar created? Why were the state and society created? To serve the larger public interest. And somewhere we seem to have forgotten that. And many times when we wake up, the first thing we do is we become consumers of especially the digital markets, or we feel that we are subjects of the state. But what could we do differently if we thought of ourselves as citizens first and took back the power of Samaj to itself? And all the work that I do is animated by this idea, because there are thousands of wonderful civil society organizations in India that work with Samaj and the institutions of Samaj to empower people to solve their own problems in their own contexts. And that's why I put together this book.
Beautiful. Harish, let me turn to you. Since we're talking about Samaj first, today you have multinational companies that have GDPs larger, that have market caps larger than the GDP of many countries. Do you think that that Bazaar has become too powerful in relation to Samaj?
So, interesting question. Firstly, Rohini, congratulations on the launch of your book. And I just want to tell everyone in the audience, I read this book over a long flight, and I could not put it down.
Thank you so much.
There is a beautiful introduction which brings the framework of Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar together. It constructed a new paradigm in my mind, to tell you the truth. And there are a number of writings and speeches that Rohini has delivered over the past 15 years, which kind of show the evolution in her thinking, but also bring all these three subjects together. And then a beautiful epilogue, of course, at the end. But I enjoyed reading the book. Heartiest congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So, interesting question, Aarti. Yes, it is true. It's funny, maybe it was a slip of the tongue when you said the GDP of companies. Because it just does look like the GDP of companies. If you look at Apple and look at a market cap which is in a couple of trillion dollars. But to me, power, if power is only about financial power, because both GDP and market cap measure financial power, then there is perhaps some truth to what you say. That corporations have got stronger because the market capitalization of corporations across the world, in the US, in China, in India, everywhere, has got larger and larger in comparison to, let's say, the overall global GDP. But power is not just about financial power. Power is the strongest power that exists on this earth, I think, in the words of Victor Hugo, is the power of an idea which has come. Where did the power of, environment and Greta Thunberg, which happened before our eyes over the last 2 years, where did it come from? Did it come from Bazaar? No, it came from Samaj. It came from Samaj coalescing around very strong voices which spoke for the environment. And that is today defining the way forward, both for Sarkar and for Bazaar. Take the Me Too movement, which, few years back again. Where did that come from? It came from Samaj, and it came from what is right for society. Look at the social movement today, which is sweeping many parts of the world, for instance, Iran at the moment. Where did that come from? That has come from Samaj. So my view is that in the balance of power, okay, and to tell you the truth, for Bazaar to exist, Samaj is essential. Samaj are the consumers. Samaj are the society and the community. Samaj are the shareholders. In many, many ways, they represent so many facets which are essential for Bazaar to exist. So to me, the maximum power still exists with Samaj. But Samaj is sometimes fragmented. And Samaj needs to coalesce around key ideas and put its weight behind key ideas which are essential for the future to reclaim that power. Going back to the conversation that Rohini had in Bihar when she was traveling, perhaps the fragmentation of society is one reason that this balance of power has shifted a little bit. But I think some of these movements that I have mentioned are excellent examples of how that balance can come back and Samaj can be the most powerful.
Absolutely, but also the platforms on which citizens can now gather are controlled by Bazaar. Tech platforms, Twitter. I'd love you to...
So it's true. The last week, I think newspapers have been full of conversation about Twitter. So Twitter is really the voice of Samaj. But now you have, people thinking about what happens when Bazaar has a larger control over that platform. So whether it's going to be very good for that platform or how it shapes up, I don't know. I'm no fortune teller to say this. But the fact is that this constant, interface between Bazaar and Samaj, is it constructive interface or is it conflict, is a thought on everyone's mind, no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, I just think it's true though that there is a question, you brought up social media, and yes, the power of social media, the algorithms are being designed in the offices of large companies, and those algorithms are really what are driving us to, be manipulated without being aware of what we are doing, right? But at the same time, I think it's all new. Look at how young social media is. And I have faith in the power of, and that's where I say in the book as well, that Samaj also has to learn, and the institutions of Samaj, especially civil society organizations, have to come into the digital age faster. Because we are all now in a digital age. I don't think it's going to turn back anytime soon. And we are just learning new conventions of social behavior. Right now, we are just happy with our anonymity and finally letting everything come out because we feel that there's impunity in spewing hate. But I also feel that we have reached peak polarization on social media. I'm somewhat of an optimist on that, and I think new conventions will be formed. But for that, I think Samaj has, all of us, and Samaj has to be a little more aware. CSOs have to give up. Many of them have stayed away from digital technologies in their work. I think they have to do in the digital world exactly the amazing work that they do in the physical world, so that we can make the institutions of the Bazaar more accountable to us even in the digital sphere, and similarly the state. So I think that period that people still have to catch up. CSOs have to come into the digital age much faster so that they can play the same role there that they have in issues of education, health, water, etc., 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 justice, environmental rights, etc.
What's stopping them from doing that right now?
So I think, and I don't want to paint a broad brush, and there may be people here who disagree with me, but I think the institutions that I have known, and I've known several dozens and dozens of them over the last 30 years since I started working in the civil sector, that some of them are they're older people, older leaders, first of all.
Right.
The younger ones are already digital citizens and are using technology for social change. And we support several of those, and they're very innovative, fast, and already digital from the get-go. But those who started out 30, 40 years ago, obviously, are a little less likely to turn to technology to defend the Samaj's needs and rights. I think that's what it is. You're seeing the change. It's happening, but we need much more and faster.
Beautiful, and that's the perfect segue into my next question, which is, you talk in your book very beautifully about the evolution of Samaj in India. And you say that there's much to mine from India's highly diverse Samaj with its 5,000-year-old history, replete with tensions, differences, trade-offs, and periods of harmony. Tell us a little bit about that evolution. Tell us about how that past should inform our present. What should we be doing today? And how should we be inspired by the past?
Look, I'm not a researcher, academic. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert. I come to this as a little bit of the journalist mind, but also because of the work I have been able to do and support, but mostly as a citizen, as someone from the Samaj who cares about being part of creating the society that one would like to live in, right? Everyone wants to live in a good society. So I won't go too much into history. So many people have already written about a better balance between Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. And I would just say that today, what should we do? What can we all do as citizens? What kind of new formations do we need to create? What kind of new belongings? What kind of new groupings do we need to create so that the voice of Samaj, which I'm calling the wider public interest, and I know Samaj is not some homogeneous happy family, obviously not, as Harish very rightly pointed out, but I think we need new forms of association of the Samaj, new moral leadership to help us all hold Sarkar and Bazaar much more accountable to the larger public interest. I think there is a need for us to, as I say in the book, unfortunately, and I'm telling you, Bombay is better off than my dear city, Bangalore, right now. But, and even though I think Bangalore has more reformers per square inch than any other city in the country, we are still struggling to get our government to be more accountable to giving us better roads, we are trying. And we are just trying very hard. But how do we all get better at it? Because unfortunately, we can't sit back and consume good governance. I wish we could, just because we pay our taxes and just because we vote. Unfortunately, that's not enough. So today's democracies need citizens who are at least at the local level getting involved with electoral democracy, with politics in the best sense of the word. And we have to co-create the good governance that we so much desire. So that's the evolution of Samaj, even though it's so much easier to be a consumer of markets than to be a citizen involved in local problems of waste management and roads and health and schools, etc. But if we don't do that, then every time we point one finger, we are pointing three back at ourselves. So something has to change.
Yeah. You also talked about how when your husband was running for elections in Bangalore, you had a very real experience of you were canvassing door to door. And you talked about how we don't focus enough as citizens on holding our lawmakers accountable for making laws.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was quite an intense experience when my husband Nandan stood for the Lok Sabha elections in 2014 in South Bangalore. And one of the things we observed is that people, partly because of what I'm saying, that there are so many gaps between our ambitions and our ability to organize ourselves, that everybody pins hope on the MPs, the MLAs, but even the MPs to fix the roads outside there. And even people in high-rises used to say, the roads outside my apartment are not right, and what is Nandan going to do about it? And I could understand their frustration, because everybody's frustrated. Why are things not happening for us? But I later reflecting on it, and because of my work with marvelous organizations on access to better justice, you begin to realize how important good laws are to make good societies, right? And none of us, thank you, none of us focus on who are the people who are going to give us those good laws that will help our society to get better each time. And it's supposed to be our legislators. And it's supposed to be a feedback process. There's supposed to be a discourse on the formation of good laws. But none of us remember to ask the legislators that we vote for, how are you going to play out your constitutional role of creating laws? We only ask them to do stuff directly for our short-term interests because we are frustrated that government doesn't seem to be working for us. But if more of us asked about lawmaking, got involved and gave our feedback on laws that are being and they're always put out most of the time anyway, for public consultation. I feel even politicians would be able to be more effective at delivering the good governance we all see. That's the point I was trying to make, because nowhere in the election, not even one person ever asked about this question wherever I went. So it's something I began to think about and then wrote and spoke about later.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about what sort of laws we need to be pushing back against. But before that, I want to come to you. When we were having a conversation a few days ago, you talked about the role of Bazaar in galvanizing citizens to vote. And you told me a beautiful story about Tata Tea. Could you tell us about that and why you did that?
Yes, Aarti. But since both of you have talked about voting, I should tell Rohini, you know, when Nandan's campaign was happening, I was working in Titan. I was a resident of Baswangudi. And I saw what a fine campaign all of you ran at that time.
Thank you.
It was,
I won't ask whom you voted for, it's all right. Secret ballot.
but I did go to Krishnarao Park and listen to Nandan speak.
Oh yes, I remember that day.
So I did do that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. And since you're referring to voting, you know, the example I was quoting to you was the example of a brand of the Tata Group, Tata Tea. I don't know how many of you, it's not the right time to make a sales pitch for Tata Tea, though at heart I am a marketer, but I won't do that now. But with Tata Tea, we have this very interesting platform called Jagore. I don't know if you all have heard or seen Jagore. So Jagore started as a marketing platform for Tata Tea because we said when you have a cup of tea, you wake up. But you should wake up not only to the day ahead, you should also wake up to your civic responsibilities. That's exactly the philosophy that Rohini has stated just now. And like all of us marketers, we brought it into a catchy phrase saying Jagore. Now, the first campaign of Jagore was really about corrupt politicians and how you can stop paying a bribe or report if a bribe is being asked, you know, that kind of thing. But the second one that we did was on voting. And we actually found, we called it the power of 49, because 49% of the population of India is women, but the voting percentage amongst women is typically lower. It used to be much lower, now it's gone up a little bit. And around the time of the 2014 campaign, I think, when we ran the Power of 49, the 2014 general elections, we ran the Power of 49 campaign. We encouraged women to register themselves to vote. But we also set up a platform under Jagore to help them to register. Because a lot of women are hesitant because even the process of registration takes a long time. And we ran 2 campaigns on 2 elections around voting. What was incredible was that it was not just thousands of women, but I think the numbers were in millions. The people who came to the Jagore platform and wanted to register and registered to vote. So as you know, that brings me back to the point Rohini was making earlier. What did we do? We provided a unifying message and we provided a digital platform where people could come and register. So what Rohini was saying, if social organizations today adopt the power of digital and the power of digital messaging, because a lot of this messaging also happened digitally, you can get responses in the millions. And to me, that was the power of what the Jagore campaign showed.
It was a very successful campaign, actually. Congratulations on that. And that really illustrates to me the power of when the best of Bazaar works with the best of Samaj, the civil society organizations. I know you worked with Janagraha and others at the time. So, because the interests of the Bazaar and the Samaj are very deeply aligned. And sometimes corporate CEOs, except people like Harish, may not quite recognize how aligned the interest of civil society and civil society organizations are, because business cannot even function legitimately without peace, prosperity, and growing equity.
Yeah. And really, Rohini, you know, it did good because women registered to vote.
Correct.
It also did good for Bazaar because Tata Tea was regarded as a responsible brand for
Yes.
running a campaign like
Yes.
this. So the interests are indeed aligned.
Yeah. And do you, sorry, I'm taking over you.
No,
See,
no.
I'm a journalist. I tend to ask questions. I'm sorry. You can continue
No,
after
please.
this. But do you see, because I know what the Tata Group does, but do you see a shifting, a sort of deep shift in where global capitalism is headed? May not be all of it, obviously, but do you see consumers changing? Do you see people demanding different things, especially in light of climate change?
No doubt about it, Rohini. And there are two examples I want to share, two stories I want to share. One is definitely I see a shift in where many global corporations are heading, may not be all. Let me take an example from outside the Tata Group. Take a huge global corporation like Unilever. And Unilever's own commitment to sustainability and the environment, which started from the days of Paul Polman, when he was the global chairman and CEO, yes, and continuing right until today. I have a lot of respect for what Unilever is doing across the world with many of their brands.
Yeah.
Neither Tata nor Unilever are perfect, but we are trying to do what we can. Similarly, there are many other global corporations which are doing it today. Many of you would have read recently the story of Patagonia and what Patagonia has done for the environment, but more recently what its founder has done. So many global corporations are heading towards that. But your question, is society demanding that? And the story I have here to narrate is of my own daughter. My daughter is 26 years of age. A couple of years back, she had 2 or 3 job offers with her once she finished college. And in her selection process of which company she wanted to work for, one of her criteria was, is this a company that is doing good to the planet or doing good to society? And I noticed that many people of her generation are using such filters for the products they buy, for the companies they want to work for. So if Bazaar has to be really successful in the future, I think it had better respect the views of the Gen Z population which is coming up now.
Yeah. They definitely want to work for more responsible companies that they can feel proud to work for. And I think that's a huge movement, especially among young people, that is bound to have an impact on Bazaar.
Absolutely. And I don't know that in our generation we would have done that, Rohini. Certainly it was not top of my mind when I graduated from college, but it is top of my daughter's and her friend's mind today.
Yeah, so just yesterday I was sitting with an environmentalist leader called Adam Werbach from the US. And he was the first person who very calmly told me how optimistic he was. Some of you, I can't see, there are many young people, but I see some old people of my age. And people of my age always worry, what is going to happen to our grandchildren's futures, okay? Because that's the one thing that tugs at us and say, what kind of world are we leaving for these little ones? And yesterday, I'm so delighted to tell you that my heart filled with hope again, because Adam, who was the youngest president of the Sierra Club and went through several environmental agitationist periods, worked very successfully to restore a lot of rewilding in America, etc., now works in Amazon. So people said he's gone to the dark side. But he was telling me, actually think of it this way. This is the biggest project humanity has ever undertaken, to undo the damage of 300 years and to commit that approximately by 250 to 70, it's going to restore carbon levels to what they were pre-industrial, or try to get there, or at least to limit it to under 2 degrees of warming and hopefully 1.5. But he says, although there are many things that are not, we are complaining about the last 30 years that our governments are not doing enough, we don't understand how much is already on track to get there. And he says he believes that when my grandson is 60, he believes that among other things, and it's not only about carbon, but he thinks there'll be less carbon in the air than there is today. And he gave me many examples of that. And that really made me think. And he said, of course, that doesn't mean all of us can go to sleep. There's a good story coming. But if we do what we know we have to do, we are going to get there. And I must say, I slept very well last night.
If of course, if he is to be believed, I mean, I don't want to be a dampener, but there is also a lot of negative news about greenwashing, right? Companies are making commitments. A lot of these are on paper. Does it actually translate into action on the ground? And I think business has to change the way it fundamentally operates. Dramatically, if we need to get to this place where everyone can sleep well at night. So let me ask you, you're a storyteller and you have stories about, about the Tata Group in your book, 40 Stories. Tell us a story about the future. What does the future of business look like in this new world in order to get to this place where we can all sleep well at night?
So I think the future clearly belongs to companies, corporations, businesses which respect the planet, which respect the people on this planet, and which take tangible actions to reach there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one recent story that I am very inspired by, which has come about in the Tata Group itself, is our commitment to the electric vehicle journey. And 3 or 4 years back, electric vehicles were not seen on the roads of India. Yeah. Just 3 or 4 days back, I read the news that the Tata Nexon EV, which is India's largest selling electric vehicle, has crossed 50,000 in sale. There are people, therefore, who are purchasing that kind of a product which is good for the planet. But to be able to market EVs, you need to develop the technology for EVs. You need to produce vehicles which people find cost effective. You need to build the EV ecosystem around it, the charging ecosystem, the ecosystem for using it. But if you're able to do that very well, imagine that when India uses millions of electric vehicles a few years from now, not just from the Tata Group, from all companies which market vehicles, imagine the amount of carbon which would come down in, what Rohini was saying. So 50, 60 years from now, when our grandchildren are inhabiting this earth, if it was all EVs in India, then imagine the amount of carbon which would come down at that time. So EVs is just one example.
Yeah, actually it's a very small, honestly, in terms of the carbon footprint, it's quite small, but it's significant that people are making that change.
Choice.
And the best thing is that when you make one green choice, it's an infectious thing to do. Then you want to make the next one and the next one and the next one.
So people are making that choice. Yeah. And this may be EVs, this may be sustainable packaging, this may be other sustainable foods that you eat.
Or reduced consumption. You don't necessarily want to buy your 50th dress.
Or responsible consumption. Responsible consumption.
Yeah.
So it could be any of these. Yeah. But the future belongs to such corporations, Aarti. This is what the world will look forward to.
But what do you need the Sarkar to do to make that happen?
I think there are many things the Sarkar can do and sometimes does as well. Sometimes when there are good products which are important for the nation, how can the Sarkar be supportive of them? And there are many ways for the Sarkar to be supportive. There can be incentives that are provided for good products, for people to buy them or for companies to make them. There can be support infrastructure which is put in place. Like for EVs, you can have the entire charging and the, whatever is the surround infrastructure that is required. Sometimes, as Rohini's book says, some of these things can be made into policy. Yeah. You actually talk in your book about Samaj movements being the basis of policy, and maybe, Rohini, it's a good time for you to just narrate what happened there, which shows the power of Samaj in moving to create policy.
No, definitely institutions of Samaj, when they come together effectively, you can change the policy environment, because there are enough people in the bureaucracy, in the political class, that obviously want to create better policies and laws. And through my work, I've always seen bureaucrats being very, very proactive in coming. And so, for example, some of the work we did in Argyam, with many, many marvelous partners working on water in the different hydrogeologies of India, working together on what are the right processes to make participative groundwater management happen. And the success in 5 to 7 years was that almost every policy document in India today looks at the sustainable use of groundwater in very great detail. So you can impact Sarkar, you can impact the policy, but we need Samaj broadly to support civil society organizations for sure to make that happen. We need more people to support the think tanks that we have. There are so many excellent think tanks doing very great work on policy inputs, but I think ordinary people need to support them a little more.
Absolutely. Rohini, I have a question. Now we're talking about Bazaar, but one of the side effects of Bazaar is also wealth inequality. It's somewhere in the design of how Bazaar functions.
And it's the main effect, no?
Yes, it certainly seems that way. And in a sense, you grew up, like you said in your book, middle class, Mumbai. You came into ethical wealth later, but you have been a beneficiary of that inequality also. And then you also have this article which you've written recently where you talk about that 1% in India is creating a sort of private bubble of infrastructure. Now, there is a huge pushback against inequality all around the world. Is it going to come to India? When is it going to come to India? What do the extremely wealthy have to do about that here?
Thank you for that very important question. Yes, I am incredibly privileged and fortunate to have come into great wealth unexpectedly. Like we didn't expect to come into such great wealth when Infosys did so well. But, and it took us all some time to get used to this idea that, I was on the other side, and in India, when I was growing up right here in Mumbai in the 60s and early 70s, we always thought as wealthy people as not quite the best citizens of India. And then I suddenly found myself being part of that tribe, and I said, oh my God. And then I had to think, what is therefore the role of the wealth that we have? And I very strongly and firmly believe that while we need wealth creation, and Indians are very optimistic about our society where wealth creation will continue to happen in the foreseeable future, but the responsibility of that wealth is for the larger public interest. And I don't see why any Samaj or any Sarkar will tolerate such runaway wealth creation in so few hands if they don't see it coming back for the good of larger society. You will see issues when that wealth is not used responsibly. And so at least there are many of us who believe that our wealth has to be held in trust. That doesn't mean that we can't live a good lifestyle. Let me say, we are not sacrificing or anything, not saying anything like that, but that the bulk of it, and that's why we have signed the Giving Pledge, the bulk of it must go back to make a better society. But I think in India, there is still not that much backlash against the wealthy. And the wealthy, therefore, have even more responsibility to use that wealth wisely because of so much inequity in society. But yeah, I think we ourselves should be thinking very closely about the response. And one of the things I said recently in light of the Bangalore floods and everything, Harish, was that the elite, and that includes many of the people in this room, we have just seceded from public services quite happily over the last several decades. Very different from when I grew up in Mumbai, by the way. My father was a salaried professional, and we lived a perfectly normal, wonderful life though. We didn't need so many things. And you know why? Because the public infra in Bombay was so fantastic, relatively speaking. We had good, clean water in our taps. We had electricity. It was very rare to have a power cut. We had safe public transport. I could go on number 84 and come back at 11 p.m. I mean, my mother was not very happy with that, but you could still come home very safely,
yes.
Right? We had fantastic plays, arts, culture. We had everything that a great city should be. And therefore, there was not that much of a difference between the wealthy and the not wealthy. But over the decades, the wealthy started to secede from public services. We have everything private, from water to electricity to schools to healthcare to everything, right? And so that distances you from the rest. But then you realize, as we all did in the pandemic, that it is the end of secession. We can no longer secede from pandemics, from bad quality air, from flooding. And so I urge the wealthy and privileged among us, what can we do? Our elite privileges are built on very shaky public foundation. What can we all do together as Samaj and as the elite and privileged to make that public foundation stronger? Because even then, the things that we build on top of them will be more sustainable too.
Beautiful. And I think that's a perfect note on which to turn the conversation out into the audience as well. So maybe we can take a few questions. Who wants to go first?
I start.
All right. My request is just... I think we can hear you. My request is just everyone please state your name and also please be very clear with what your question is.
Rohini and Harish Bhat, and to you, ma'am. It's a pleasure to listen to you so clear with the formats, what the laws should shape up like, who should deliver. And when you spoke about the privileges, what the wealthy people like you had, and then you spoke about pandemic, that life abhi humko samaj mein wapas dena hai. My question to you is, may it be whatever governments who decides the census, लेकिन what about the ballots, what about the vote? अगर हम एक तरफ से वुमेन को लाते हैं, रजिस्टर कराते हैं, लेकिन उसके बाद हमारा परिवार बोलता है कि वोट कोई भी लायक नहीं है, कोई भी वोट देने के लायक नहीं है, हम अपना वोट्स we keep our votes back, we don't deliver it to the we go and make a negative this, neither vote to this party nor who are the legislators who will decide what small infighting is? यहाँ पर तो political scenario, everybody is after their seats. The wealthy, the politicians, they have made a mess out of people's life. And the poor people, the oppressed people of this society, I'm referring back to you, two wonderful people who want to do good for the society. It looks like you're going back to the Gandhian area, right? You have.
Sorry to interrupt, but your question is, if we don't have, who do we vote for?
We have fighting people amongst the political scenario. एक बोलता है ये लॉस करना चाहिए, एक बोलता है वो हमारे घर के बाहर रास्ते बनाओ.
Thank you.
What are we going for? What are the real topics which are supposed to be for the people, for the dynamics, for the young people of the country?
Right.
वो उस पे कोई मुद्दा नहीं है, कोई ध्यान नहीं है. There's total infighting.
Thank you.
There's abuse. Which is prevalent in our country.
I do understand your frustration.
And thank you, Tata Group, for really thinking about the people's in their products and all that.
You know what I found though? I found politicians, and I've now had to deal with, and during the campaign it was very true. Actually, politicians are very closely related to the problems of the citizens, and they listen to them very clearly. So I'll tell you, there is nothing like popular pressure that any political system can resist. So again, from my point of view, I keep the lens on Samaj. What can we as Samaj do to bring up better politicians? Some of the work, for example, that is being supported right now, there are several NGOs like the Indian School for Democracy, there is Takshashila, that are helping to train wannabe politicians in how they can be better lawmakers, better politicians. No, that's okay. You see, change takes time, sir. Change takes time, sir. All my job here is to remind us what can we do better. They say you get the government you deserve. So what can we all do better to inform ourselves better and to engage better in the political process, which is about, what is a political process? It is about the better distribution of power in society. So it's a long process. We are such a young democracy, only 75 years old. Harish?
So, yes,
Harish?
so Rohini, to supplement that, firstly, I understand your frustrations completely, sir.
Absolutely.
I think very, very valid point, very passionately put forward. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're right. Even if we did a campaign on voting with Jagore, you know, how successful it was or what impact it has had, I do not want to opine now. The fact is that a few million women came and registered and voted. Is that a drop in the ocean? Yes, it is a drop in the ocean in the huge population of India. But just like Rohini applies herself from the Samaj's perspective, I apply myself from the Bazaar's perspective and say, what can we do? However small or however large it is. Some things will be small, some things will be large. But if each of us applies ourselves to it, I think, like they say, many drops can make a mighty ocean. That's what I would say, sir.
Beautiful. Can we take a question from this gentleman here? This one in the blue shirt. Yes, please. You, sir.
There is no problem. I will not ask question to Mr. Bhat because I know him very well. I talked to him so many times in Tata meetings. I will directly ask question to Rohini. And my question, you said your book is Samaj, Bazaar and Sarkar. And you refer to Bihar all the time, Patna. See, and he talks about digital environment. But above this all, Because when you visited Bihar, what is important in Bihar is jugaad. And if you do jugaad, then you don't require Sarkar. That is what I have seen. I made one big project in Bihar in 0 mile. And that was a challenge because all labor problems were there. So we made it because we made jugaad. And when I went, it was in 73. Again, I went in 2007.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, but what is your question, sir?
My question is, whatever you talk about Samaj, Bazaar and Sarkar, digital, environment, you must have jugaad. If you don't have jugaad, you cannot carry anything.
I mean, yeah, clearly when there are not enough systems that are supportive, you need local innovation. But remember, Bihar is the place where the Champaran agitation started in 1917. Bihar is the place where JP Narayan Sampurna Kranti revolution was playing out very beautifully. Bihar is the place where many peasant movements have started. So you mentioned Bihar, so I'm saying that the Samaj has been terrifically active. Anupam Mishra, who is one of my mentors, who did a lot of work on water, spoke of the many traditions in Bihar where people had deep engineering skills and they had agency to deploy their own skills to have phenomenal traditional water harvesting systems, etc., water canal systems, etc. So the point of my work is really how can we help people to bring back the agency of Samaj to become part of the solution rather than remain part of the problem. Yes.
Could we take a question from that lady over there?
Thank you. So I had an interesting question hearing all of you. We understand the value and the importance that the Samaj holds. But what does it take to make a consensus Samaj? Because considering the gap in the income gap that we have in our country, we have job security, which is a problem. We have a lot of basic issues that are a problem to a major part of the society. So what are the next steps that you see that you're expecting from Samaj or that you're seeing as the top-down approach from Bazaar and Sarkar that will bring some change?
Is your question to either one of them?
To the entire forum, please.
You want to go first?
Yeah. So let me at least present a perspective from the Bazaar side first, and then talk a little bit about the Samaj side as well. So I think the big problems that society faces, or the big problems that the planet faces, I think are at least the large ones are very clear to us. It could be environment degradation and climate change. It could be health and wellness and I can narrate some of these. So I think from a Bazaar perspective, how do corporations align themselves with finding solutions to these issues is, to me, the first step. May not be possible for corporations to find solutions to each of these issues, but I think each of us in a company knows what our core competencies are, what our industry is, and how can we use those competencies to find small or large solutions to these issues. As far as Samaj is concerned, I think a good first step would be on each of these large issues, whether it's water, whether it's environment, whether it is whether it's health and wellness. How can Samaj coalesce around some very prominent voices which can take these issues to Sarkar or take these issues to Bazaar? As I pointed out in my very first answer, I think Samaj faces fragmentation. And these powerful voices, I mentioned, for instance, Greta Thunberg on environment. There are many Indian voices which are very powerful. Rohini's own book makes that case beautifully. So how can we coalesce around powerful voices which can take the required issues to Sarkar and Bazaar and get alignment from them? That's what I would say, Rohini.
Yeah, I can't see you very well, but you're very young. And so I would say to you, people like you, very important, the future belongs to you. And so what can you do in the present, right? I think just getting involved in something very local about which you are very passionate, and it could be as simple as improving your neighborhood park. It could be as simple as sprucing up the government school library. It could be as simple as cycling instead of walking and cycling instead of driving and creating a group of enthusiasts to do it. It could be almost anything. It could be joining all the amazing young people, young leaders, civil society organizations that I know of, like Reap Benefit, just for example, that is creating what they call Solve Ninjas all over the country, where young people are trained to inspire other people to take any little problem and gather a group of people who are willing to work on it. So I think building out a strong Samaj begins right from where we are and begins with any issue whatsoever that we are interested in. And one thing builds to another and makes movements, leadership, and institutions of the Samaj that feel stronger and feel more enabled to take on the larger problems. So I would say, do just anything that interests you that is outside of your self-interest and more in the social interest. And it's so joyful a process. And it is so intellectually stimulating as well, that it is one of the biggest joys of our lives.
I agree completely with Rohini. And you don't have to wait for a crisis to brew.
Yeah.
You can do it even proactively.
Yeah.
You know, anything like cleaning up a community park, or doing something in your society to set right a road. So, you know, Rohini, we used a phrase for it, going back to my Jagore campaign. After the voting campaign was done, the next campaign that we did, we said, alarm bajne ke pehle Jagore.
Perfect.
You don't have to wait for the alarm to go off in your community. Well, before it does, you should wake up.
Fantastic.
Let's take a question from there. This guy. I think after this we have time for one more.
Thank you so much, sir. My question is that we have 950 million voters in India, out of which approximately 460 are young. 60% of every state's population is young. Sadly, this population is not coming out to vote. There is an interest, but it is not coming out to vote. This is us, I mean, the younger generation. Since you spoke about electoral politics and voting, what are the ideas or initiatives that you think that sort of groups should take to essentially increase or at least get the young people out to vote? The Jago campaign was a great beginning to at least get people interested, but it has failed. Like the larger sect, I mean, in terms of the voter count, if you see, women are sort of registered more than men, but sadly not coming out to vote. So what do you think can be done to solve this problem, is my question to you.
But actually, if you look at voting rates from around the world, India is doing fairly well. In many elections, we get 65 to 70% of the people coming out to vote, and that's a lot. But I'm no expert at all, so I'm just saying, I wish everybody who wants to vote could vote more easily, right? And certainly there's the technology available, so long as we do it safely so that there's absolutely no possibility of fraud. But technically, I feel more people would vote if it was much more convenient for them to vote from where they are. And today we have technologies, we have the whole public digital infrastructure to allow us to create a much better, but again, I'm not the expert, but I think to your question, already a lot of people are voting. In fact, the elite vote much less than the others in India, right? We see poor people, they'll do anything. Their vote is so precious to them. It's people like us if we have to go off on a holiday, we don't want to vote, right? But I would say what would be greatly interesting in the next few years is what are the technologies we could deploy so that people could vote safely, authentically, and without fraud from wherever they are. I think young people would participate by the tens of millions if they could do that.
I think one final question. I want to take it from another woman, yes. That girl over there, in the orange. No, sorry, it's that lady behind you has the mic.
Thank you.
It's too late for pessimism, sir. We all have to wake up and work.
Hi, my name is Kejal, and I just want to take forward from where she left and push the envelope a bit on the question. Why do we need struggles like Greta or Me Too to come for us to realize what's our social moral responsibility as individuals? And we know how difficult it is for a Greta to come up and exist amongst the kind of huge powers in the world. So I think is there space from where you are located in that context, is there space for imagination and self kind of realization of sorts that we need to evolve to respond to the challenges rather than being pressured by already oppressed groups to say that, oh, now you should do something?
So we can take, if you can just be very briefly ask your question, we can take them both together, and then that'll be the final one.
Structural problem
Okay.
in the Bazaar, because one of the other great global problems is inequality.
Too late.
And it would seem that there is a conflict there between the Bazaar and fixing inequality. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yes. Just very briefly,
on
and
Bazaar
then we just
and
want to
the
close.
structural issue with that he's raising.
Yes, please.
So the issue is, all of us refer to the creation of wealth, okay? But the creation of wealth is not just wealth only for the elite. Rohini has already said that there's a responsibility that wealthy people have, all of us have, to give back to the community. There's this very famous book written by R.M. Lala called The Creation of Wealth. It's a history of the Tata Group since it was founded. But he's actually talking of the wealth the group has created for society.
Yeah.
And how has that got aligned? It has got aligned because when the group was founded, Jamshedji Tata wanted to put the community at the center. And eventually we have ended up through his sons, him and the leaders after that, with the 2/3 of our shareholding of our parent company being held by the Tata Charitable Trust. In a way, structurally, that aligns the group to what the community requires. There may be many such other structural methods to make that happen, but this is one way that corporations can make it happen.
But there's a lot of movement now for conscious capitalism
That's
and
right.
for shareholder capitalism. These are all fringe movements, but they're coming to the center. People are looking at post-GDP valuation. How can we really value things that are not just in the current GDP framework? How can we build natural capital accounting into our systems? And for all of these, I think all of us as citizens need to be a little more interested and become the pressure that needs to build on both Sarkar and Bazaar.
Absolutely. Well said. I'm not going to sum up because this is an invitation to have a conversation about our future. And what I'd really like to do is close with setting a sort of vision, in intention, and I'd like to do that by requesting Rohini to read the last paragraph of her book, which I thought was very
Thank you
beautiful.
so much. It won't take too long. Just by the way, as to try an experiment, just like we did in Pratham Books, we wanted to democratize the joy of reading, and we wanted to really open it up, so we created a Creative Commons platform. And today there are tens of millions of children who participate on the Story Weaver platform of Pratham Books. There are thousands of writers, illustrators, editors who give freely of their time and talent. And there are books there for all of you who have children, nieces, grandchildren, in 300 languages, absolutely free to read. So inspired by the success of that, I self-published this book. And you can buy it, and I hope those who can afford it will buy it, because the proceeds will obviously go to one of my philanthropic foundations. But it is also available to download free, especially for students and others, because this book is really an invitation to continue. The book is an invitation to continue the public discourse on what I think is one of the most important issues of our time. How will Samaj work to hold the Bazaar and Sarkar much more accountable to the larger public interest? So I'll read the last paragraph very quickly. Thank you for that. Oops, I should have marked it to save time. You have marked it already? Ah, it's here. Okay. All right. So, thank you. The world of nature, especially in India's rich, multi-hued forests, has been my refuge, my inspiration, and the temple for my sadhana in this personal journey. As I look to the horizon, the lasting image for me is that of the miraculous murmuration of starlings. As they fly in high-speed synchronicity, thousands of these little birds can project in the collective the same form as in the individual. The big sky shimmers with the mesmerizing starling form made up of myriad small starlings. The metaphor of this dynamic fractal is incredibly powerful to me. When we are engaged in action with mindful awareness of those around us, together we become better and bigger versions of ourselves. If only we could imagine a murmuration where Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar could move seamlessly together, with Samaj at the head, painting a gigantic picture of a being at its humane best. Thank you, Dhanyavad.
Oh, absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much.